This is the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management topics to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at www.thepmpodcast.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to episode number 45. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast for the 19th of August 2006. We've been announcing today's interview for 2 weeks already, so the tension that you are probably feeling must be enormous. Yes, today is the day when we will be finally discussing international project management, and of course with a particular focus by looking at the project management experience that Kai Bevan had when he was working in Japan. But as always, before we get to the main section, few announcements and of course also our helpful resources. Let me get started with an email that I have received this week. I don't often read emails, so this has to be something extremely good, and yes it is. Here we go. Cornelius, I thought you might be interested to know that this fall I am requiring my students to listen to your Earned Value Management podcast. The course is a junior level class that is required of all business students. We'll have somewhere in the excess of 600 students, possibly 800 or more. I'm using the concept of business cases as a framework to discuss various systems such as ERP, SCM, etc. The podcast will be required listening for the class session where I introduce business cases. Seems like a nice fit to me. Thanks again for producing such a valuable podcast. And this was written to me by Craig Van Slyke. He is a PhD and Associate Professor of the MIS, the Management Information Systems, at the University of Central Florida. You cannot believe how proud this makes me, Craig. This is absolutely an honor that a university, the University of Central Florida, actually requires that their students listen to this particular program here. This is just, thank you. It touches me very much. Today's episode is sponsored by BOT International, the provider of processes on demand. PMO processes and policies can be time-consuming to set up and tailor for different departments and locations throughout the organization. BOT's Processes on Demand solves this problem, providing customizable PMO processes, policies, and dashboards that you can install on your network, tailor as needed, and access right from your browser. To learn more, please visit www.botinternational.com. Yeah, and as always with our sponsors, if you want to visit them, the best way from our point of view is, of course, if you go to our website and click on the banner that is displayed at www.thepmpodcast.com, because that way the sponsor knows that you have found them through us. And while you're over there, why don't you check out the 3 polls on the right-hand side of the site? And yes, they now work, because in the past 2 weeks I've made the announcements that I have polls up there, and somehow I set them wrong, some setting was off, and only one person was able to vote, and everyone else who stopped by couldn't vote. So go ahead and vote for us now, because it's now working. First question is, do you like the website? Yes or no? The second question is, how long should a podcast be? And the third question is, should a long interview be broken up into 2 episodes? The last question at the moment is a tie. 6 versus 6 people said yes or no, because next weekend I have a long interview coming your way, and I'm considering it that I want to cut it up into 2 episodes. So let me know whether yes, 2 episodes, or no, 1 episodes. Thank you very much. Oh, also, I noticed that many of you listen to the podcast directly. By that I mean you go to the website and you click on the little words that say, click here to listen to this episode. Well, there are 2 things that you can do to simplify that process. The first one is, of course, automated. iTunes is free. Download iTunes to your computer and subscribe to the Project Management Podcast and every other podcast that you want in iTunes. You don't even need an iPod for that. The software can be installed on your computer and it will download the latest versions of the podcasts that you subscribe to fully automatically for you, and you can still listen to it directly on your computer. So that way you've got it all automated. But if you don't want that, if you want to click manually, then why not subscribe to my mailing list? You send an email to pmpodcast-subscribe@googlegroups.com, and that way you subscribe to that mailing list, and once a week you get an email that says, hey, there's a new episode of the Project Management Podcast available. If you haven't remembered the email address, don't worry. On the left-hand side in the menu, under the subscribe area, there is now also a link that says get a weekly reminder. So click on that and it'll take you to where you can subscribe to the weekly emails. Right, here we go with the helpful resources this week, and we are actually focusing on my upcoming new show. I've talked about it in the past, the Project Management Prepcast. I'm still on target to launch it in September, towards the end of September, I said. And today, in anticipation of that, I'm going to give you 3 helpful resources for free PMP study information, because the Project Management Prepcast, that is going to be the podcast which will prepare you to take the PMP exam. Alright, these 3 helpful resources are, first of all, PM Study. PM Study is offers a free simulated practice test. So if you want something as close as it gets to the actual PMP exam, 200 questions, 4 hours, etc., surf over to PM Study and sign up for their simulated practice tests. Once you sign up for it, yes, you have to give your name, you have to give a password, telephone number, email address, etc., but you get a real test for free. So once you've signed up and once you logged on, the test is available to you for 24 hours, and in that 24-hour period, 100 users are allowed to take this test. And also the sign-up that you do is, of course, good for various areas in the PM Study website. They have more than just the free simulated test, but that's my helpful resource for you today. The second helpful resource is the Yahoo groups. The Yahoo groups have many groups that focus on how to pass the PMP exam. And the one that I would like to suggest that you subscribe to is the PMP Study Group. Yeah, that's what it's called, PMP Study Group in Yahoo. It's a valuable resource for you if you are preparing to take the test, to read other people's other people's questions about the exam, about the PMBOK, and then read the answers that PMPs like myself give on this group. And you're also, of course, able to post your own questions. Yeah, this is a great resource if you want to get into the groove and read up on the PMP exam and have some live interaction there. Finally, this is a huge one, the third helpful resource. This is PM Hub. PM Hub is probably the largest area where project managers gather in order to pass, or to prepare rather, for the PMP exam. PM Hub has a forum, they have study notes, they have book suggestions, there's a blog, you have files to download, and there are articles. I mean, you name it. There is everything that you can possibly want, except, of course, a podcast for project management, professional exam preparation. That's the only thing they don't have. But everything else that you may want, they have. And frankly, if you cannot find what you're looking for, then probably you have your eyes closed. All right, and those were my 3 helpful resources, free PMP preparation information in anticipation of my upcoming Project Management Prepcast. As always, go to thepmpodcast.com and you will find these helpful resources in the helpful resources section. There's a link at the bottom of every episode in the show notes. You may have noticed that today I didn't do a listener question. Well, I haven't received one this week, so I couldn't answer a question from anyone. If you have a question about project management, why don't you send it over, pmpodcast@gmail.com, and I will answer your question in email and also here on the show. And now let's move on to the main topic. But before we start the interview with Kai, let me give you a qualifier. As you are listening to our discussion about project management in Japan, please remember that neither Kai nor I claim that these 25 minutes discussions that we're doing here is all there is to project management in Japan. Project management is a wide field, and what you hear today is Kai Baven's experience as a project manager in Japan. If you yourself work in Japan on projects, then your experience is very likely different, and that's just the nature of things. All we want to do with this interview is give you a glimpse into project management in another culture. And in a few weeks, you will be able to hear an interview about a project management office in Sri Lanka that will give you a different perspective about working in another culture, yet again. And if you are currently working in a culture that is not your original culture, why don't you send over an email to me and we can do an interview about how you feel, what your experiences are in that different culture. Would actually be great to hear a project manager from Japan talking about what he experienced over here in the United States and how he feels about that. All right, let's move on here with the interview. Kai Baven has been a project manager since 1999. He started originally with IBM Global Services in Germany and France and worked for them for 2 years. After that, he was for 2 years in the car manufacturing industry in Germany, and then he worked for 3 years in Japan with the Citigroup doing system integration projects and also process reengineering. Currently, Kai is working as a engagement manager for Mantis Incorporated, implementing anti-money laundering, trading compliance, and also fraud detection software within the financial industry. Here we go. Here is what Kai experienced as a project manager in Japan.
The Project Management Podcast feature interview. Today with Kai Baven, Engagement Manager at Mantis Incorporated.
Hallo Kai und recht herzlich willkommen zu unserem Programm heute.
Hallo Cornelius, wie geht's? How are you today?
Ja, danke, geht gut. Kai, you're from Germany. You spent 3 years as a project manager in Japan, and you are now working in the United States. What kind of projects do you manage?
Currently, I'm working for Mantis Incorporated, which is a company providing fraud detection, anti-money laundering software to financial institutions, and those deployments are right now my main focus of work.
And what about the projects that you had worked on in Japan? What were they like?
In Japan, I mainly did like a systems integration and process reengineering. Was the main focus of my work over there. Working for Citigroup, big American company, I guess, and was kind of challenging there.
Right, and I also learned just now that your wife is also a project manager, right? So a project management couple, very unusual. What kind of projects does she manage?
My wife manages, it's right now more a strategic role. She works for the government printing office and manages their integration and re-engineering projects.
let's move on to our main topic, project management in Japan. What would you say is the major difference between project management in Japan and project management in all of the other countries that you have worked in?
I mean, in general, everything is pretty much the same. Everything is about people and communication. But in Japan, I don't know if you know, it's the project structure is very hierarchical driven, and senior leadership is more or less involved, and a lot of stakeholders are have an opinion on everything. That in that regards, it is kind of impossible just to have a strong communication plan and to do lots of padding on your project project times and estimates. Everything just takes a little bit longer than we know it from a Western world here.
Now, I'm a young project manager. Is it true what I've heard that in Japan you kind of need to have a certain age as a project manager in order to be respected?
Yes and no. I mean, the company or the projects you're working at and with makes it necessary to have always senior sponsorship. That means even when you're a very experienced project manager, you always have somebody above you who is really monitoring you. And especially when it comes to stakeholder communication, your boss needs to be involved in all of those steps. That means even when you just send an email, it's required when you communicate to somebody who is one level higher as yourself, just to include yourself for those communication in order to make sure that everybody's informed, everybody feels comfortable with everything.
And what about the language barrier? Did you find that that is also a difficult thing to come over to get over?
Actually, it is. I mean, in Japan, or what I experienced working in certain departments within my organization over there, usually 95% of the audience doesn't speak English or doesn't speak English very well. Therefore, it is very helpful when you try and learn the basic of a language just to be able to pick up some of the phrases and side conversations over there. Furthermore, it's very appreciated when you speak a little bit Japanese. But other than that, email communication can be done in English. Everybody's able to read, but everybody's kind of, what I experienced, afraid to speak it.
How were you respected by other project managers in Japan, considering that you're a gaijin, a foreigner?
I think it's true in each country. You're only respected when you really deliver what you promised, and as long you do so, and you really have your timelines on schedule or on track, you are very well respected. And in Japan, it's also interesting because they always look sometimes up to gaijins, how they or we are managing projects. Everybody expects that you have kind of a project management background. You know what PMP is or Prince2 and all those tools which are used.
Yeah, that's a great segue. What project management certifications did your colleagues in Japan have?
A few of my colleagues had PMP certifications or Prince2 certifications or working with guidelines according to Prince2. But I think in Japan it's a bit different since this country really uses lean management and Kaizen, which was actually developed over there. And most of the PMs over there are using those methodologies for their daily work. So from this perspective, PMP is well accepted, but everybody knows what Kaizen or lean management means. And also basics of Six Sigma are coming from there. So are very well managed out of those principles.
You yourself, you told me that you are currently aiming to get an MBA in project management, and then after that you're going to do the PMP certification. So that means when you were in Japan, you didn't have these certificates. Did that cause any issues, the fact that you didn't have a piece of paper that says, hey, I'm a certified project manager?
During as long as you work and deliver everything what on the schedule and what your target statement of work are, it doesn't make any difference. But when you apply for a new job, what we experienced is that's better to have a certification, only to say, okay, I did this exercise and I know what I'm talking about. At least all the words or all the abstracts are known to everybody. So when we hired people or we looked for people, certainly we looked for certifications like PMP.
Okay, so does that mean that since there is a pressure from the human resources side to have a certification, does this then mean that the formal education, the piece of paper, is something that people in Japan are working for, are striving towards?
Yes, it is. I think it's more not only an not only a Japanese thing. It's also like an Asian thing that you need to have this piece of paper which really certifies that you are able to do so. And it's good to show your resume or your CV experience and certifications. Always very helpful.
Losing your face is something that we here in the Western world always hear about Asia. How does losing your face play in when it comes to project management in Japan?
Losing your face is, as you mentioned, in Japan a big thing. And like project members sometimes not able or willing to communicate any issues or failures in order not to be embarrassed by others. But I think, as for myself, it's sometimes easier just to go to a stakeholder and apologize in person in order not to lose face. And I think it's highly appreciated when you do that. But other than that, when it really comes at the end that you did a mistake and the project or one deliverable is going to fail, you will lose your face in Japan. And it's very difficult after that just to gain trust again.
Wow. I also heard rumors that spoke about the fact that the requirements that you get are more implied than implicit. So even though they're written down, there is always something implied behind it. Now, is this true? And if this is actually true, how do you actually manage it if something is implied and not explicitly told to you as project manager?
This is very true, Cornelius. Everything which is not written in a statement of work, this is what we usually use in order to say, okay, these are my deliverables for a project, are still expected. So the only thing what I experienced to do is really a strong stakeholder communication, that you really manage expectations as well as go and see your stakeholders at least once a week and to say, okay, what do you expect, what do you want to see, in order to make sure that those requirements in a phase 2 or captured in a phase 2 or that they are captured in a change request for the entire project. Otherwise, what I experienced is that the project is going to fail, just not meeting expectations.
You know, if I compare this to what we do here in the Western world, it's probably the same thing. Even though we write it down, there are still things that are implied and not implicit. So good communications is therefore even more important in Japan than it is over here, I take it.
Yes, this is a fact. And also, the people or the community within the company is very strong. And I guess like it is here, it's like you have an old boys club and you'd really have to manage the entire old boys club in order to get your project delivered and successfully delivered.
You were talking about going to meet with the stakeholders on a regular basis. Is it easy to get buy-in from stakeholders then, because so much is implied and not implicit? Is it, or the steering committee, for instance?
I think a steering committee is a good thing to get buy-in, but what I experience is more important to see each stakeholder by himself or herself, just to explain objectives and to get input from the stakeholder side. And do this a couple times before steering committee, that nobody's really overwhelmed when a steering committee comes up, in order to get decisions done. So really visit on a regular basis, have lunch, or try to see for a coffee, like small talk, just to get your message delivered.
Now, when we originally agreed on this interview, one of the questions that I sent over to you is how fast are decisions made? And you answered that by sending a drawing back to me, and I'm going to put the drawing up on the website so that people can see that. Can you explain the drawing to the audience, please?
The drawing just has a start and an end point, and in the Western world what we have seen is like there is usually a small detour. But in Japan, what my experience is it's more a circle around the goal, and then finally you will make it. But what I experienced is that a project usually takes 30 to 50% longer than you would expect it. And having said that, you really need to pad your project estimates in that way that you really can live with those constraints.
What I know from the Western world is that when I pad my project, management usually sees that and they say, oh, no, this is not going to take 6 weeks, you're only going to get 3 weeks for that. Is it the same situation in Japan where your project timeline just gets cut in half, even though you know exactly that it's never going to work?
Certainly, they have also constraints or concerns on that. However, when you really explain your project plan to each of the stakeholders individual rather than as a group, everybody will understand your paddings, and there's a buy-in certainly.
Over here, I'm also used to, professional exchange with my project management colleagues. We openly discuss issues that we have in our company and we exchange ideas for solutions. Did you talk at all with project managers in Japan, and what was that exchange like?
What I experienced is that the exchange is more on a private or personal basis. That means as a gaijin, it's you're usually connected to other gaijins or foreigners, and so you see all the constraints or experience other foreigners have. But also you have certain groups, or PMP chapter, for example, is very strong in Tokyo, where you really can exchange ideas or also exchange experience. And I found it very helpful just to talk to those guys.
Let me take you back to the first project that you worked on in Japan. What was that like for you?
It was first a culture shock, I must say. I just arrived there and also barely spoke the language. And then I was given this one project. It was a system integration project, and the timelines were scheduled out of the United States, and then you stand there by yourself just with your project schedule where you know it's not going to work. So it took a long time just to get the project back on track and also to communicate back to the headquarters in the US that this timeline is not going to work. But it was really like being thrown in a cold water.
Yeah, it has to be expected. So what would you do differently today then if you ran another project in Japan? What would your approach be?
My approach would be just at the beginning, strong communication to all the stakeholders. I think I always come back to stakeholders in Japan, and just to get their thoughts, ideas, and estimates on certain tasks in order to make it successful. It also really helps you to manage later on expectations that nobody, I didn't mean this, or didn't mean that, etc., etc.
So, in conclusion, is then good communication with the stakeholders the key to managing projects in Japan, or do you have any additional advice for a project manager who is right now on the airplane to Japan to lead a project?
I think a strong communication to all stakeholders is the key to success over there, but also being able to agree that they have a different culture on doing things or do a different way to do things. You need to accept that, and also you should try to pick up the language a little bit. That makes it easier sometimes, as I mentioned before, to pick up side conversations in meetings, or just to let your audience see that you really try hard to meet their needs as well.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much for this conversation about project management in Japan. And now, are you ready to move on to the final 10 questions?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, 10 standard questions that I ask everyone at the end of my interviews here. Let's get going. Number 1, what was your favorite project?
That was in early 2000, Aventis Intranet CEO broadcast implementation throughout the entire corporation.
And number 2, what project would you like to have managed?
I don't know if you've seen the Storebælt Bridge in Denmark. It's the tallest building or monument in Denmark, and it's just amazing, and I would love to have managed this project.
Number 3, what is your favorite project management book?
I recently read the Project Manager's Desk Reference. I think it's very well written, and it contains a lot of information you can learn from.
And number 4, what is the topic of the next seminar that you are planning to attend?
Working right now with anti-money laundry projects in the US, certainly an anti-money laundry topic.
Number 5, what is the best way to make a project fail?
Not to be able to manage expectations.
Number 6, how do you like to celebrate a successful project?
I always like to invite my entire team for a party and just have a good time.
Number 7, in your projects, where do you focus most of your attention in order to be successful?
Stakeholder communication, statement of work, and project financials. Those are the 3 key elements I'm looking at in order not to fail.
Yeah, I would have guessed that stakeholder communication has to be part of that from your past experience. Number 8, if you weren't a project manager, what would you like to be?
I would like to be a landscape architect or a gardener who is growing orchids.
Number 9, what is the one thing that a project manager cannot live without?
I think without humor, it's not possible to have fun at work.
And finally, number 10, the oldest question in project management. What is more important in a project manager? Is it project management expertise or is it industry expertise?
I think project management expertise and leadership skills are the most important things in project management.
All right, Kai. Thank you very much for having been on the program today. It's been a pleasure having had you here, and thank you very much for your time. Domo arigato.
Thank you very much. Doi tashimashita, Cornelius.
And that was Kai Bæven talking to me about his experience as a project manager in Japan. Let me remind you that you will find a link to purchase the books that all our interview guests recommend in our helpful resources under the books section. If you click on that link and you purchase the book through us, that will help us cover the cost of the program. Thank you very much. Well, yeah, and that's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. Tune in again next week when we will be talking about scalable project management methodologies. As always, you can find us on the web at www.thepmpodcast.com, or you can send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. And when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And of course, when you stop by at thepmpodcast.com, please don't forget to click on the link labeled PM Templates to increase your productivity and check out the great PM templates that are offered. And finally, we have this. A badly planned project will take about 3 times longer than expected. A well-planned project, only twice that long. Until next time.